Imagine for a moment that you are swimming. The water is murky, filled with silt and primitive algae. It is warm, but dark. You are safe from sharks because sharks as we know them do not exist yet. You're safe from whales because mammals are millions of years away. But you are not alone. Below you, in the shadows of the riverbed, something is watching. It has hundreds of lenses in its compound eyes, tracking your movement. It waits. Suddenly, the water erupts. Two massive spiked claws, each the size of a human arm, shoot upward. They clamp down with the force of a hydraulic press. You are pulled under. This is not a scene from a science fiction movie. This was reality on Earth 390 million years ago. You have just met the Jaekelopterus, the giant sea scorpion, the largest arthropod to ever crawl or swim on the face of this planet. Welcome back to Primeval Life. Today, we are diving deep into the Devonian Period, long before the T-Rex and long before humans walked the Earth. We are going to explore the reign of the ultimate creepy crawler, a monster that makes modern spiders and scorpions look like cute toys. When we think of the ocean's deadliest predators, we think of the megalodon or the mosasaurus. But there was a time when the oceans didn't belong to fish or reptiles. They belonged to the bugs. Meet the Eurypterids. We call them sea scorpions, and for a very good reason. They possessed hard, armored exoskeletons, jointed legs, and terrifying pincers. Most were small, scurrying across the sea floor looking for scraps. But one family of these creatures decided that eating scraps wasn't enough. They wanted to be the kings. And the king of them all was Jaekelopterus. Let's talk about size. Because when we say giant scorpion, it's hard to visualize just how big this thing actually was. The largest fossil claw ever found of a Jaekelopterus measured 46 centimeters. That is 18 inches, a foot and a half, just for the claw. Based on that claw, paleontologists estimate that Jaekelopterus grew to a length of roughly 2.5 meters. That is over 8 feet long. Imagine a scorpion that is longer than a grand piano. Imagine a bug that is taller than the tallest NBA player in history. If a Jaekelopterus stood on its tail in your living room, it would scrape the ceiling. It was an armored tank. Its body was covered with thick chitin plates that protected it from, well, actually, nothing. Because when Jaekelopterus was alive, nothing else in the water was big enough to hurt it. It was the apex predator, the top of the food chain. But how did a bug get this big? Today, insects and arachnids are limited by the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere and the mechanics of their exoskeleton. If an ant grew to the size of a dog today, it would collapse under its own weight and suffocate. So what was different back then? The Devonian Period was a strange time. The atmosphere was evolving, and oxygen levels were fluctuating. But more importantly, there was an evolutionary vacuum. Vertebrates, animals with backbones like fish and early amphibians, were still new to the game. They were small, soft, and slow. There were no jaws of steel yet. There were no rapid swimming sharks. The ocean was wide open for a different kind of monster to take charge, and the arthropods took that opportunity. Jaekelopterus didn't just drift in the deep ocean. Evidence suggests it lived in brackish waters, estuaries, lagoons, and river deltas. This makes it even more terrifying. It didn't just live in the black depths. It lived in the shallow waters, the kind of water you could wade into. Let's look at its weaponry. This creature was built for violence. Unlike modern scorpions that use a venomous stinger at the end of a tail, Jaekelopterus relied on brute force. It likely didn't have a stinger. It didn't need one. Its primary weapons were those massive chelicerae, the front claws. These weren't just for holding food. They were serrated. They had teeth. Jaekelopterus was an ambush predator.
Its eyes were positioned on the side of its head, giving it excellent peripheral vision to spot movement in the murky water. It would lie in wait, buried partially in the silt of a riverbed. When a primitive armored fish swam by, Jaekelopterus would lunge. It used paddle-like limbs near the back of its body to propel itself forward with a burst of speed. Snap! The claws would extend instantly. The spikes on the claws would puncture the fish's armor, locking it in place. Then the sea scorpion would pull the prey toward its mouth, shredding it apart piece by piece. It was a brutal, mechanical way to eat. There is a theory that makes Jaekelopterus even more nightmarish for us humans. We know that during the Devonian period, life was starting to make a transition. The first tetrapods, our very distant ancestors, were beginning to drag themselves out of the water and onto the mudflats. These early ancestors were slow, clumsy, and small. They were trying to escape the dangerous waters to find safety on the land. But Jaekelopterus might have followed them. While it was a marine animal, its body structure suggests it could navigate very shallow water. Imagine our very earliest ancestors crawling onto the mud, thinking they had escaped the monsters of the deep. And then, surging out of the shallows, comes an 8-foot-long armored nightmare. It drags itself onto the wet sand, snatching a primitive tetrapod before sliding back into the gloom. It is entirely possible that Jaekelopterus feasted on the very creatures that would eventually evolve into dinosaurs, mammals, and humans. It was the gatekeeper of the land. However, no king rules forever. The reign of the giant sea scorpions eventually came to an end. The world began to change. The oxygen levels shifted. But the biggest threat to Jaekelopterus wasn't the atmosphere. It was the rise of the fish. Evolution was working fast. Fish were developing jaws. They were developing harder bones. They were becoming faster, smarter, and more aggressive. Enter the Jaekelopterus, the armored fish with a bite force stronger than a T-Rex. As these massive placoderms took over the oceans, the advantage of the sea scorpions vanished. Their armor could be crushed by the new bone-shattering jaws of the vertebrate giants. The giant arthropods were outcompeted. They could not molt their shells fast enough to grow. They could not swim fast enough to escape the new predators. By the end of the Permian period, the entire line of sea scorpions was wiped from the face of the earth. The biggest bugs to ever exist went extinct. Today, the only remnants of Jaekelopterus are fossils found in rocks in Germany and Wyoming. We look at them in museums, safely behind glass. It is hard to believe that a creature this alien, this monstrous, actually lived on our planet. It reminds us that Earth has not always been our home. For millions of years, it was a planet of monsters. So, the next time you see a little scorpion in the desert or a spider in your garden and you feel a shiver of fear, just remember, it could be worse. You could be swimming in a prehistoric river with an 8-foot giant waiting in the mud beneath your feet. What do you think? Would you survive 5 minutes in the Devonian Ocean? And what prehistoric monster do you want us to cover next? If you enjoyed this journey into the deep past, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This is Primeval Life, and we will see you in the next era.